As we're enjoying this beautiful fall day today, hasn't been an amazing journey to hear about the people in the Northlands who've had, 48 inches of snow? It made me think about a family that I know that live in a country, not in a country, but in the country, in a region that gets a lot of snow. And there's a brother and a sister who like to tell the story about their winter entertainment. They would be fascinated by watching cars slip and slide on the snowy dirt road that was on a steep hill next to their house. And the neighbors would be driving home in a snowstorm, and they would build up their speed at the bottom and then turn right onto the dirt road and race up the hill, hoping that they would maintain the necessary momentum to make it all the way to the top of the hill. Well, now from the children's window seat, they would cheer for those who succeeded, and then they would groan for those who landed in the ditch. And then they would run downstairs and already find that their dad was going outside to get the tractor to pull them out. And their mother would be putting out more plates to set on the table. So these snowy mishaps, if you will, created the possibility of unexpected guests at the table. And as the dinner time arrived, their mom would say, "Don't touch the chicken until we see if they are hungry." Or for short, it became, "Don't touch the chicken, even if it was spaghetti." And out of those few words, "Don't touch the chicken," a meal that was planned for 4 or 5 often fed 7 or 8, or however many needed to eat at that meal. And no one went hungry. Sometimes out of the experience, the family met their neighbors for the first time. These were a spontaneous opportunity for sharing a meal together. And then while they ate, there would be Dad out pulling the cars out of the ditch. And all of them together would wait for the snowplow to pass by. Perhaps you know people like this family. Perhaps you are this family. Perhaps you are like my mother-in-law, Rick's mother, who always cooks more than is needed and then invites friends and neighbors to come for a meal. Or maybe you have experienced the miracle of church potluck dinners. Have you ever thought about church potluck dinners? You never know who's going to bring what kind of food. In my 35 years of ministry, I've only had one potluck dinner in my entire life where everybody brought the same main dish. That's pretty good odds. You want to guess what it was? Hungarian goulash. Can you believe? All the dishes were Hungarian goulash. I've been in the practice during my years of ministry of always being the last one in line at a potluck dinner to be sure that everyone has something to eat. And I have never, ever gone away hungry. Today, people around the world are experiencing the blessing of a common meal where everyone is invited to the table. Just think about that for a moment. There will be some for whom it is exactly the same time we are. For some, it will have already happened. For some, it will be later in this 24-hour period. But everywhere around the world, people are coming to a common table, a table where there is always room for everyone. Imagine all the different customs about eating around the world. Stephanie helped us think about it with different kinds of bread. In some cultures, there are expectations of what age person eats first. The oldest, the youngest. In other cultures, there are traditions of who prepares and serves the food. And in some places, the host will not eat until all of the guests have finished eating. Regardless of what our practice is of how we eat or our local customs, or whether we have a certain status or a certain income, or we wear a certain color clothes, or anything else, when we come to the Lord's table, Jesus provides all the food we need. Jesus says to us today, I am the bread of life. Jesus identifies himself as the one who gives life to the world. He assures us that whoever accepts him shall never hunger or thirst again. Jesus is the source of our spiritual well-being and new life. As Jesus gives to us, so we learn about sharing in community together. Those early Christians came together in a new community of faith, and they were one in mind and heart. They shared with each other everything they had. And with a new faith came a new way of life. And for them it had an emphasis on sharing. It wasn't about handouts. It was about pulling together resources so that all could have what was needed. And need was defined by what was required to go into the world and tell the good news of Jesus' life and ministry and new life. Those who had resources shared what they had so that all could serve the call of Christ. When we come to this worship service today, and when we come to our communion table, we are coming in the midst of a week that has challenged the notion of sharing as community. You see, that notion of sharing together in a community is often threatening because we live in a culture that prefers to collect and control rather than to share. We've heard plenty this week about how our national leaders struggle to know how to share resources without control. And we react, all of us, by cutting off resources rather than extending what is needed. We also don't quite know how to respond when we are mandated to share, like the flood of those seeking health insurance this week. Sharing becomes a bit more complicated than it might sound at first. It isn't a simple task to live together with a concern for the needs of all. It requires a change in how we think before we can change how we act. It takes a focus on our common faith. We often live as a people hungry for collecting our possessions, and then we become afraid of losing them. But these things are not ours to possess in the first place. All we have comes from God and is really only ours on loan. We often forget that. But when we forget, we hear again the words of Jesus for us. He says to each and every one of us, I am the bread of life. No one will be hungry. Not hungry for food, not hungry for community, not hungry for love. Our call to share is not just about how much we throw in the common soup pot. It's about how we involve ourselves in relationships and how we look toward the needs of others. That's the message of the world today. That's the message right here in Silver Lake, Kansas. As we share what God has given us, we empower others to fulfill the image of God within them. We give strength to each other to witness to the God who made us stewards of all God's creation, so that no one leaves the table hungry. We share of ourselves and the many ways that we reach out to others with God's love. And so I invite you today, as we come to the common table, the communion table, may this be a time, a holy moment for each of us and for all of us. May we receive the gift of Jesus as the bread of our life and celebrate our community of faith right here and around the world. Thanks be to God, who creates us and who unites us as one with bread and love for all. Amen.